Hello students and welcome to Supporting Learners. So in this video we are going to study about the cell theory. This is the part 2 of Cell, the Unit of Life, which is chapter 8 of class 11th biology. Now before starting with the cell theory, if you remember, I had told you about the discovery of the cells in the last video, and we saw that it was not easy to discover the cells in the first place. Why? Because we needed microscopes. Because cells are not visible with the naked eye, so we need microscopes to see them. So many scientists like Robert Hooke, he designed his own microscopes and then he observed the cells under that microscope. And then came Anton van Leeuwenhoek, he also made many microscopes and he observed the living cells for the first time, and also he saw many unicellular organisms. So this was all around the 1600s. Then after that, in the 1838, a German botanist, Matthias Sheldon, studied the cells of plants. So Matthias Sheldon, he was a botanist. Botanists are the scientists who study the plants, who work on the plants. So he was working on plants, and in 1839, a zoologist, Theodor Schwann, studied the animal cells. So Theodor Schwann, he was a zoologist. Zoologists are the scientists who work on animals. So Sheldon was studying the plants and Schwann, he was studying about the animals. And they were studying it separately. And they, gave their observations, and Matthias Sheldon announced that all the plants are composed of cells. And Theodor Schwann, he stated that all the animals were formed of cells. And then after that, they came together and they gave their cell theory. Matthias Sheldon, he was, since he was studying the plants, so he could observe the cell wall, because plants, they have a cell wall. And Theodor Schwann, because he was studying animal cells, he could not observe the cell wall. So this was the difference that they observed. So after that, when they came together, they gave their cell theory, and the cell theory states that first, all the plants and animals are composed of cells, and second, that cell is the basic unit of life. Now these points of cell theory, they seem to be very obvious to you, and we all know that this is very obvious in today's time. But imagine in the 1800s, when it was so difficult to study the cells, and nothing detailed was known about these cells. At that time, they gave these statements, this theory of cell theory. So this was very, very important, and this is a major contribution in the field of biology. But there were some limitations of this cell theory. The first limitation was that this theory could not explain how the cells were formed. So they could not explain the origin of the cells. They believed, Sheldon and Schwann, they believed in the theory of spontaneous generation. Spontaneous generation means that the living cells were formed, or they originated from non-living things. This is what is meant by spontaneous generation. But it was later, disproven. So this was actually one of the limitations, you can say, of the cell theory. And secondly, organisms like viruses, viroids and prions, they are exceptions to the cell theory, because cell theory says that all the plants and animals, they are composed of cells. But viruses, they are actually, a subcellular in nature, because outside the living body, they are non-living. They need a host cell in order to replicate, in order to divide. So inside the body of the host, they are called living, but outside the host, they cannot multiply, they cannot replicate, so they are considered non-living. So they fall under the exception of the cell theory. Now after that came a scientist called Rudolf Virchow. Rudolf Virchow, actually, he explained that cells divided and new cells were formed from pre-existing cells. So in 1855, this scientist Rudolf Virchow, he actually explained how the cells were formed. Today we know this as cell division, the process of cell division, that one cell, it divides to form two cells. We know this by the process of cell division. So we know that new cells, they are formed from the cell that is existing. So this is the parent cell and this is the daughter cell. But at that time, the origin of cells was actually explained for the very first time. So it was a big thing, and he had given a major contribution in the cell theory. So cell theory, actually, he modified the hypothesis of Sheldon and Schwamm and gave the final shape to the cell theory. So what is the final cell theory now? That all the living organisms are composed of cells and the products of the cell. And second, that all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. So this is the final cell theory, in which the Rudolph's explanation is also included. Right? So this is all about the cell theory and the scientists involved in this theory. Now let us solve some multiple choice question in order to test what we have learned so far. So the first question, which of the following scientists contributed to the cell theory? And these are your options. Pause the video and read the options and tell the answer in the comment box. Yes, so the answer is B. Matthew Sheldon, Theodor Schwann and Rudolf Virchow. Yes, B is the right answer. Question 2. Cell theory was proposed by A. botanist, B. zoologist, C. both A and B, and D. a psychologist. So we know that the cell theory was proposed by both botanist and zoologist. So answer is C, A and B. The botanist was Matthew Sheldon and zoologist was Theodor Schwann. Question 3. Which of the following scientists concluded that all the animals are made up of cells? And these are your 4 options. So yes, the answer is D. Theodor Schwann. Theodor Schwann, since he was a zoologist, so he concluded that all the animals are made up of cells. Question 4. Cell theory states that, first statement, all the living cells must have a cell wall. Second, all the living cells require glucose for survival. And third statement, basic unit of life is a cell. So cell theory, let's look at the statements one by one. All the cells must have a cell wall. No, this statement is false. This statement is not what cell theory states. And anyway, all the cells do not have a cell wall, because we see that plant cells have cell wall but animal cells lack cell wall. ग्लूकोज की कोई भी बात नहीं करी गई थी सेल थ्योरी में, so this statement is also wrong. Third, basic unit of life is a cell. Yes, this was a statement of cell theory. So answer is third only. So C, third only is the answer. Question 5. Which of the following is not one of the main components of cell theory? A, cell must contain DNA. This is not the component of cell theory. All living things are made up of cells. Yes, all living things are indeed made up of cells. Cells can only come from other cells. Yes, this was stated by Virchow. And cells are the basic unit of life. Yes, this statement is also a component of cell theory. So the answer is A. Question 6. Which of the following is not a premise of cell theory? First, all cells arise from other cells. Second, all living cells requires water for survival. And third, all living things are composed of cells. So first statement, all cells arise from other cells. Yes, this is a premise of cell theory. All living cells requires water for survival. This was not described in the cell theory. All living things are only composed of cells. Only is wrong over here. This was not a premise of cell theory that all the living things are only composed of cells. Yes, living things are composed of cells, but there are many other things that are present in the cell, that are present in the living organisms, not only the cells. So only first statement is right and the other two statements are wrong. So they are not a premise of cell theory. So answer is second and third, D option. Question 7. He advanced the cell theory with his conclusion that cells could only come from other cells. And these are your 4 options. Yes, the answer is B, Rudolf Virchow. Question 8. Omnicellular E-cellular was given by, and your options are as follows. So yes, it's a very direct question. Omnicellular e-cellular was given by Rudolf Virchow. Answer is option A. If you like this video, then hit the like button, subscribe to Supporting Learners and hit the bell icon to receive the notification whenever a new video is uploaded on Supporting Learners.